Ridge Runner's requital. Now you boys make yourselves comfortable and I'll tell you all about it. This is the story of my brother Shane and what happened after he got a mite too friendly with a neighbor girl. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Ma always said I should begin a story in the beginning and not in the middle, like I always do. Ma always was a stickler for details like that. I guess I should start this story by telling you all about my ma, since the story begins with her. She was born in the mountains above the Taco Valley in Georgia and went to Pulliam Elementary School when she was a UN and quit school after she finished 6th grade. You see, my grandparents didn't have no money to let her board in town to go to high school and they was too far away for her to travel to town every day. Anyways, she never got more schooling other than the 6th grade. But she did all right for herself. She never wanted for roof or loaf since the moment she left home. She married a horse trader who traveled all over the South, buying and selling horses. She moved down to a little town north of Atlanta and had 2 children by my pa, my older brother, Shane, and me. Now, like I said, my pa was a traveling man and got home seldom. He made good money at it and ma didn't want him to quit. So she stayed home and raised us kids all alone. Don't get it in your minds that she was lonely though, my ma was a herb doctor. Folks from all round used to come to her for cures for what ailed them. She had prenticed to a wise woman when she was a child and knew purty near everything there is to know about the herbs hereabouts. Some folks said she was a hoodoo woman too, but I don't know nothing about that. If she knew about it, she never told me and she taught me a powerful lot about plants and herbs and such. I can say that folks hereabouts were scared to cross her though, but I expect they just didn't want to make the only herb doctor in town mad at them. Not that she'd do anything to anyone. She was just as sweet could be. 'Cept if you did something bad that the law couldn't get you on. Then she could be as mean as a grizzly and a snit, if you get my meaning. My ma always said you don't have to be a Bible thumper to know what's right. And right is right, she'd tell me when I was a young UN. My ma wasn't much of a churchgoer as you can guess. She only went into a church twice after she left home, once when she was married and the last time when we buried her. Anyways, this is a story about my brother Shane and not about my ma, so I'd best be getting to telling you all about him. Shane was born 10 years ahead of me and pa was dead by the time this story takes place. Pa had got himself kicked in the head 3 years before and died while he was on the road. Ma had the body shipped home and buried him right on the property. The Baptist church wouldn't have him in their churchyard since he wasn't a church-going man and since Ma didn't much care for the Baptists anyway, she decided to bury him at home. After he died, she used to say she saw more of him now that he was dead than when he was alive. Leastwise, he couldn't move round none and she always knew where he was. My brother was 18 when Pa died and had a hankering to get out on his own. He stayed round for about a year, but after he saw that Ma didn't need him to take care of her, he left home. Shane went up north and tried to get a job in the steel mills, but he didn't have no pull with the union so he gave up and came back to Georgia. He knocked round and did odd jobs but just couldn't find anything to suit him, so he came home. Ma let him stay in his old room and never got on him about not having a steady job. She used to say a man's got to find his proper place in the world and Shane just hadn't found his. I figured he was just plain lazy. I was 10 at the time and didn't like having to do all the chores by myself. Not that I had to draw water from the well or anything like that. Pa had a lot of insurance on him when he died and we had a nice house on a small horse ranch. But it rankled me that he'd just sit round eating our food and not do a lick of work. He talked Ma into getting a television set and he'd sit all day watching TV while Ma was out with her patients and I was in school. When I got home, he'd skedaddle off with his friends to drink beer and chase girls all night. That was what got him in trouble with Ma. You see, I'd had a small accident out in the yard and pretty near burned down the chicken coop. I was 10 then and wanted to see if I could build a fire and make pine tar like people in olden times used to do. I know you young folk don't know much about pine tar, so I'll tell you how it was made. First you take a big iron pot and pack it full with knots of fat pine. That's knots that's full of resin for those of you who don't know. Then you take the pot and turn it upside down on a big flat rock with a piece of tin underneath so's the tar will collect on the tin and run out. Then you'd get some clay and mix it with water so's it was good and stiff and pack it round the bottom of the pot to keep the fire from getting into the pine. When that was all done, you'd take wood and pile it on top of the pot to make a bonfire. After the bonfire was lit, the heat'd make the tar run right of the pine knots without burning. You'd collect the tar as it ran off in another pot or coffee can or something. Anyway, being a child at the time, I liked to watch bonfires and thought it'd be nice to make some pine tar to give Ma for her doctoring. It has all kinds of uses round a farm. People'd take it and put it on the cows' scrapes and cuts. They'd force it down into the tear ducts of the sheep when they got head rot to open their heads up, and they'd put it on horses' hooves when they got sore feet. They even used it to grease the axles of the olden wooden wagons. Ma used it to doctor the livestock, of course, but she also used it to doctor humans too. She'd put it on blisters and sores and even poison ivy if it blistered up like it does when you get into a lot of it. She made a cough syrup from sulfur, molasses, and pine tar that was good for the ague. If your chest was tight from a bad cold, she'd rub pine tar right on your chest. So you can see how useful it was. People who didn't have any money to give Ma for doctoring would make pine tar to barter for doctoring so's they wouldn't be too beholden to Ma. Anyway, I thought it'd please Ma if I made some and gave it to her. The only big flat rock we had sat right next to the chicken coop. I reckoned that it'd be safe enough if I watched the fire careful and set it up. The bonfire was burning fine and the tar had just started to flow when a big spurt of fire came out from 'neath the pot and shot across the yard. I guess some of the mud I had chinked the pot with had come free and let the fire get to the hot pine knots. That fire hit the side of the chicken coop and started burning it immediate like. I throwed a bucket of water on it, but it didn't do no good. The side of the chicken coop was fair burning when Ma came home and saw what was happening. She put out the fire quick and then took me behind the kitchen to the woodshed and blistered my bottom with a hickory switch for setting fire to the chicken coop. She was mad. And not just at me either. She figured if Shane wasn't going to work regular, then the least he could do was stay at home and watch his younger sister. When he came home that night, she was waiting for him on her chair on the porch. Ma caught him by the arm and tripped him up, making him fall right on her lap. She held him down on her lap and told him what I had done. She told him she had had enough of his foolishness and that if he was going to act like a child she'd treat him like one. Then she began switching on his bottom with the same piece of hickory. I was peeking out the window of my room and saw the whole thing. She hit him hard. I can still hear the whooshing sounds that green hickory stick made just before it hit. He started a screaming for her to stop, that he'd be good, but she just kept hitting him. She ignored him and kept hitting him until he started to cry like a little boy. After a while, he was so out of breath from crying that he stopped crying and just whimpered like a baby. She stopped and told him it was the last time she'd put up with him acting bad while he lived under her roof. She asked him if he wanted to leave and he said no, so she told him that he'd be staying home from now on. As far as she was concerned, he was a young UN and would be treated like one. Then she got up and dumped him right on the porch in front of her. She made him go to bed without his supper and for the next 2 months, he went round the house doing chores and acting hangdog-like. He found a job after that with the farmer down the road helping pull stumps from some creek bottom the farmer had bought from a neighbor's widow. Ma was unhappy about me being at home alone after I had set fire to the coop, but didn't want him to give up his job. She hired the widow's daughter, Mary Jo, to come and look after me in the day while he was at work. Since she had told him it was his job to look after me, she made him pay Mary Jo. Shane didn't argue. First of all, his was scared of Ma after the switching, and second, he had taken a shine to Mary Jo. He'd come home early from the job, telling the farmer that he was feeling sick or some such and hang round talking to Mary Jo. He kept inviting her out to go with him to town, but she was a good church-going girl and wanted nothing to do with him. He'd follow behind her and bump into her accidental-like and steady himself by grabbing onto her bottom. She finally told him he was no good and she didn't want him hanging round her while she was working. He got mad and went to town to get drunk. That night, when Ma got home and heard what happened, she got mad. She was mad enough to chew horseshoes and spit out nails. She got out the hickory stick and started practicing with it for when he came home. She told me that she'd had enough. If he was going to act like this, she'd show him how bad boys got punished. I'd never seen her so mad. She told me that she'd have her patients come to her for the next month while she stayed home and took care of Shane and me. He'd spend the entire time locked in his room like a little boy and she'd only let him out for meals and to use the bathroom. Just then we heard some faint screams in the distance. Ma ran out of the house and up the path with me following right behind. We got close to the screams and burst into an opening in the woods. There stood Shane standing over Mary Jo with a piece of her blouse in his hand. He had laid for her in the woods next to the path to her mama's house and jumped her when she walked by. Ma was furious. She stalked right up to Shane and punched him in the jaw. She hit him so hard she knocked him right off his feet. He landed with a thud, then shook his head and started to get up. Ma just stepped up to him and swung an uppercut up from her hip. You could heard the crack of her fist hitting his jaw clear down the path. She laid him out cold, right on the ground. Then she went over to Mary Jo and apologized to her for what Shane had done. She checked Mary Jo to make sure she was okay and gave her some money for her dress. Ma offered to testify in court for Mary Jo against Shane, but Mary Jo wouldn't hear of it. She told Ma that it wasn't right that a mother should side with the law against her son and that she reckoned that Ma would take care of the problem. Ma looked grim and told her that she'd fix Shane so he'd never hurt anyone again. Mary Jo said that she didn't want Shane to be hurt, that it wasn't Christian to wish anybody hurt. Ma laughed and said that she'd be a poor kind of herb doctor if she couldn't do something about Shane without hurting him. She patted Mary Jo on the arm and told her not to worry, Shane would be fine and she expected he'd even learn to like what she planned to do with him. Ma sent me to the barn after one of the horses and we hauled Shane home over the horse's back like a sack of flour. The next morning Ma was waiting for Shane when he slept off the booze. He looked awful. He had big purple bruises all over his jaw where Ma hit him that ran right up to his left eye. His eyes were bloodshot and he looked kind of greenish round the gills. Ma didn't say anything to him, she just put a cup of medicinal herb tea in front of him and told him to drink it. Shane didn't say a word, he just picked up the cup with both hands like a child learning to drink from a cup and drank it right down. Ma asked him how he felt and he told her that he felt awful. He swore to her he'd never drink again. Ma just smiled, patted him on the shoulder and agreed with him. She asked him if he remembered what had happened last night and he shook his head. She told him it was all right, what was done and everything would be all right. He sat quietly at the table nursing his wounds when all of a sudden he jumped up and began to curse. Ma was at his side before you could say Jack Robinson and slapped him hard across the face. He looked at her with a polaxed expression and began to cry. I guessed her slap had hurt pretty bad for him to cry like that. He stood in front of her shivering like a newborn colt with tears running down his face. I sat at the table eating my breakfast quiet-like and watching the commotion when the reason for his cursing hit me. He had peed and pooped in his pants like a baby. You could smell it clear across the kitchen. Ma hauled him off to the bathroom to clean him up and all I could hear was the sound of him blubbering like a baby over the noise of the bathwater. After she cleaned him up, she frog walked him naked to his bedroom and that was the last I saw of Shane that day. Ma spent the next morning bringing in my old baby furniture from the shed and cleaning it up in the kitchen. Then she hauled it into the hall next to Shane's room. Towards afternoon she went into his room and I could hear her telling him in a loud voice that she didn't want him leaving his room until she got back. She locked his door behind her, told me she'd be back directly and took the truck into Atlanta. Ma returned 2 hours later with a truck full of packages she had bought and had me help her bring them into the house. She took them into Shane's room, closing the door behind her. I was mighty curious what she had done to Shane, but I didn't want to get on her bad side when she was in a mood, so I just stayed in my room and played quietly. Later on, she saw me and got me to help her move furniture. My baby furniture was gone from the hall and Shane's bedroom stuff was sitting there instead. I helped her move his bed and dresser out to the storage shed and went back to my room and played when we were finished. Towards evening I started hearing some strange noises coming from Shane's room. They was too low to hear exact, but it sounded like Ma had a squalling baby in there. Ma came out of his room, took me into the kitchen and sat me down next to the stove to talk. She told me she had given Shane some herbs to fix him. She explained that if Mary Jo had gone to the law, the sheriff would have come out and arrested him for attempting rape. That sobered me some, I'll tell you. There weren't a crime worse than rape, except maybe murder. People might understand about murder if it was a fair fight or something like that, but they'd never forgive him if he tried to rape some poor girl. Even if Mary Jo didn't want to go to the law, her mama would and then it'd be all over for Shane. It wouldn't do no good for Mary Jo to lie to her mama about what happened either. There weren't no excuse for her torn blouse and Mary Jo's mama would just keep asking until the truth came out. Ma told me that it'd go hard on Shane in jail. The other prisoners had mamas and baby sisters and didn't hold with anyone who raped women. They'd beat Shane up while he was in with them to teach him a lesson. If the beating was bad enough, he might get killed. She told me they used to execute people for rape and some folks still thought that was the best way to punish it. She told me the punishment now was life in prison. If Shane got arrested and found guilty, and Ma was near certain that they'd find him guiltier than a fox with a hen in his teeth, he'd never get out of jail. She asked me if I understood all that and I said, yes, Ma, I understand. Shane's been real bad and if he goes to jail, he might die. Leastwise, if he goes, he ain't never getting out. Ma told me that she had fixed it so Shane wouldn't have to go to jail. She reckoned that if Mary Jo's mama seed what Ma'd done to Shane, then she'd reckon justice been done and wouldn't go to the law. I told Ma I heard all the crying in Shane's room and asked Ma if she had gelded him like a calf, but she told me to hush up. It wasn't proper for a little girl to talk that way. She told me she had something else in mind that was be just as good and wouldn't hurt him. She made me promise I wouldn't make a fuss and carry on when I saw him. Then she went back into Shane's bedroom to get him. When I saw what she had done to Shane, my jaw dropped so low that you could have used it for a feeding trough. She had turned him into a baby again. She held him in her arms just as natural as anything. He couldn't have been more than 11, 12 months old. She had him all decked out in diapers covered with those white plastic baby panties. His bruises were all gone and he looked just as healthy as could be. He looked down at me all confused like he didn't know what was happening. Ma asked me, "Would you like to hold your baby brother?" "Is that Shane, Ma?" I asked, not wanting to appear foolish in front of Ma. She nodded and repeated her question, "Do you want to hold Shane, honey child? He can't hurt you. He's only a baby. You've held babies before." I took him in my arms and held him to my chest. "Now be careful, child. Don't drop him. He's not as sturdy as he used to be," she cautioned me. I couldn't get over how Ma had changed him. He was as light as anything and his fingers and toes were all short and fat just like a real baby's. He even smelt like a baby. I was patting him on the back and telling him how sweet he looked when all of a sudden my back started feeling wet. I yelled at Ma to see what was the matter and turned round so she could see. She laughed and said, "Why honey child, that's just baby slobber. You got to expect that if you hold a baby. Here, you give him back to me and I'll hold him while you go and get a cloth to wipe it off." I gave him back and was surprised again when I felt something wet on my stomach too. I looked down and saw the front of my shirt was wet where Shane's plastic panties had been. Shane had peed on me. Ma saw what he had done and said, "Go change your shirt, child, and then we'll change his diaper. You gotta know how to change diapers if you're going to be his big sister." When I came in Shane's room, they was waiting for me in the rocking chair. Ma had moved all my old baby furniture into his room and fixed it up as a nursery. It looked beautiful. The furniture looked like Ma had just bought it. Ma always said that Pa done right by me when he bought handmade Georgia oak baby furniture when she was pregnant with me. She told me that good furniture like that could be handed down to my grandchildren. It still looked as solid as the day it had been made. She got up and carried him over to the changing table and told me to stand by her and watch as she changed him. Ma laid him down on the tabletop and shinned the plastic pants down his legs and off his little feet. She told me to go to the bathroom and get the spare bar of soap and a wet washcloth and bring it to her. I ran to go get it, and when I got back she had unpinned one side and was undoing the other. She stuck the pins in the bar of soap, splaining that they'd stay sharper and wouldn't rust if they was put in soap that way. Ma lifted the diaper off his tummy and picked up his feet in one hand. The sight just fascinated me. There was my 22-year-old brother laying in a wet diaper and Ma holding up his legs with one hand so high, his bottom hung in the air. She pulled out the wet diaper with one hand and put it aside, then took a clean one and scooted it neath him, so's when she put him down, his wet bottom wouldn't touch the table. Ma wiped him down real good both front and back with the washcloth, where he was wearing the diaper. She picked up the bottle of baby powder, sprinkled it all over his private parts and rubbed it in. It was his private parts that I thought were interesting. Before Pa died, I'd seen him several times down by the creek skinny dip in, and he never looked like that. They was all shriveled up and tiny like a baby's, even accounting for his size they looked like an itty-bitty baby's private parts. I pointed them out to Ma and asked her how they got so small. She said, "Of course they're small, honey. That's what a baby's privates look like." She chuckled and continued, "'Cept a baby's privates ain't exactly private, what with everybody always putting their fingers in a baby's diapers to feel if they are wet and changing them in front of family and company." I asked her how long it'd take for Shane to grow up again, and she looked sad and said, "He ain't, honey. He's gonna stay like this the rest of his life." I asked her why and she said, "Honey, Shane was turning into a ridge runner. You saw what he did to Mary Jo. Well, if I let him get away with it, he was only gonna get worse. Sooner or later, someone woulda shot him. I don't know for sure if he woulda gotten off from the law, but I wasn't gonna allow for the possibility. No son of mine is gonna be a no good, low down, woman molestin' ridge runner. I'd rather see him in a coffin first. That's why I turned him into a baby. Least this ways, he can't hurt nobody. And nobody's gonna want to hurt him too. He'll be our sweet little Shane forever." She finished diapering him and asked me to get some clean panties from the baby dresser. When I opened the drawer, I saw it was filled with plastic panties and baby clothes. I knew then that Ma wasn't kidding me. She'd never spend that kind of money if she wasn't dead serious. I brought back the panties and gave them to Ma so she could dress him complete. After he wet my shirt, I knew why babies wear plastic panties, and I didn't want him on me without something to keep him from wetting me. He gurgled and spouted gibberish the whole time like he was trying to tell us something, but Ma never paid him no mind. She just kept on dressing him like he was a baby. When she was finished, Ma picked him up and settled him on her hip, the way you see young mamas do with their babies. She carried him into the kitchen and sat him down in my old high chair. He fussed a bit, but it didn't do no good cause he was strapped in tight. Ma tied a bib round his neck and put a pot of water on to boil. The next thing I knew, she was sitting in front of him with a jar of baby food in hand. She took off the top and started shoveling it in as fast as he could swallow, maybe a little faster. Food dribbled down his chin and fell onto his bib, but Ma didn't seem to care. She just kept shoveling it in. He spit up some of the food up like babies do, but she just spooned it up off the bib and ladled it back in. I could tell he didn't like the baby food cause of the bad faces he was marking, but it made no difference to Ma. I spect it was cause she was feeding him mashed vegetables. I couldn't tell what was in it, but it was all green like it was mainly mashed peas. He'd hated vegetables all the time I knowed him, Shane being strictly a meat and potatoes man. I guessed he was gonna have to eat different now that he was a bitty baby again. I hoped Ma would let him get used to it gradual like. Ma stopped feeding him for a time while she went to the icebox and took out a baby bottle full of milk to warm in the pot on the stove. I asked her if there was something else we could feed him, but she told me, it don't make no difference what a baby likes or Don T like. He'll eat what I feed him. If he doesn't, I'll pull down his diapers and spank him right here in the kitchen. She went back to feeding him and he seemed to perk up after that and try to eat faster. I couldn't understand it at the time. He was only a baby. How could he understand what Ma had said to me? When she finished feeding him, she gave him his bottle. When he got the bottle in his hands, he got the strangest expression on his face. Like he didn't know what to do with it. Ma warmed some leftovers for our dinner and made plates for the both of us. She sat down in the chair next to Shane and started eating. When she had eaten half a plate, she turned to Shane and said, "Drink your formula, Shane, like a good baby." Doesn't Shane remember how to drink his BABA? Come on baby. Put the nipple in your mouth. Shane sat in the high chair with the bottle in his hand staring at the nipple. If he hadn't been just a baby, I'd sworn on a stack of Bibles that he was embarrassed to suck at it. Ma finally lost patience, took the bottle from his hands and stuck the nipple in his mouth. He struggled with her for a minute, then Ma leaned over and whispered something in his ear that made all the fight go out of him. He just went kind of limp all over. The next thing I knew, Shane was sucking on that bottle to beat the band. Ma went back to her supper and he finished that bottle in record time. We washed the dishes after supper, then Ma burped him and carried him into the living room. She let him sit on the sofa with us while we watched TV. About 8 o'clock Ma carried him into his nursery and tucked him in his crib. That was the end of Shane's first day of being a baby again. The days after that were pretty much what you'd expect with a baby, mostly feedings, change-ins, and bathing. Ma got real perky toward the end of the week. She started cooing and coddling Shane like he was a real baby. She seemed to forget why she had changed him and acted like she was happy to have a baby again. I kinda got used to Shane being a baby. It was fun being an big sister instead of being the baby of the family all the time. Shane wasn't a happy baby in those days. He'd just mope round in his crib looking unhappy and embarrassed whenever he peed or pooped in his diaper. He stopped jabbering and trying to talk at us too. He just cried and whimpered whenever he needed to be changed. Guess he realized that it don't do no good to gush and blather if nobody understands you. You could tell he positively hated eating baby food or drinking his formula. He'd sit there in his high chair and refuse to eat until Ma would whisper in his ear. Then he'd eat real slow and reluctant like a hound dog being fed stale cornmeal. About a week later, Mary Jo's mama came to visit. She said she had something important to talk to Ma about. I went to my room pretending to go and play, but I was really trying to listen to what Mary Jo's mama had to say. I left my door open so's I could hear, but I couldn't make it out. She and Ma was talking real quiet in the sitting room when Shane started crying in his crib. Ma got up and said she had to see about Shane. She specked he'd messed his diaper or something, and it wasn't good to let babies bawl like that without seeing what's wrong. Mary Jo's mama acted real surprised and asked if Shane had had an accident. Ma said no, it weren't no accident. Why don't you come and see him for yourself? When Mary Jo's mama came out of the room, she looked as white as a ghost. Something Ma had said had shocked her silly. She told Ma to forget about what she had said earlier about getting the law on Shane. She shook her head and said it weren't necessary now. Shane couldn't hurt a fly the way he was now. Ma told her that she'd be pleased if Mary Jo could see her way clear to come over and talk to her. She still needed someone to look after me when she was out, and she'd like to talk to her about babysitting Shane too. Mary Jo came over the next week and had a long talk with Ma. By the time they was finished, she and Mary Jo was laughing and carrying on like they was old friends. Ma asked Mary Jo if she could watch us while she saw to some patients of hers, and Mary Jo agreed to spend the afternoon at our house. After Ma left, Mary Jo asked me to show her Shane. We tiptoed into Shane's room so's not to wake him, but he was lying awake in his crib. When he saw Mary Jo coming, he let out a yell like his diaper was on fire. Mary Jo just walked over to his crib and stood there, smiling and looking down her nose at him. I tugged on Mary Jo's sleeve and said, "He won't hurt you, Mary Jo. He's only a baby. I'll bet he doesn't even know who you are." Mary Jo shook her head and told me, "Shane knows who I am, child. And he remembers what he tried to do to me. Did you see the way he yelled when I came into the room? He's scared of me and what I'll do to him now that I'm bigger than he is. And I'll have my revenge too. Just the way your ma told me I could." I looked at her like she had gone daft and said, "Just what you talking about, Mary Jo? Any fool can see he's just a baby. And why'd you want revenge on a baby? He can't remember what he done. Ma would have told me." "'Spect she didn't want to fret you none, honey," Mary Jo told me with a grin. "But your ma told me that Shane knows everything that's going on. It's just his body that was turned into a baby, not his mind. Look in his eyes, child. A baby's eyes don't look at things the way yours and mine do. They just light on anything that they find peace in, with no sense at all behind them. Now look at Shane's eyes, see how wide and scared they look? Look at the pleading way he's looking at you. Like he expects you to save him from me. But you won't help him, I know. You'll let me get my revenge on him and there won't be a thing he can do about it 'cept cry." I got between the crib and her and stood my ground, saying, "I ain't gonna let you hurt my baby brother. He done some bad things when he was a man, but I ain't gonna let you hurt him. You hear?" She just smiled and said, "Honey child, I ain't gonna hurt him. Leastways not by talking a switch to him or anything. I told you, child, I'm gonna do what your ma told me to. That's revenge enough for me." I didn't move, she scared me talking like this. I demanded, "And what did you think ma wants you to do?" "Why, child, take care of him like he was a baby. Your ma wants me to change his dirty diapers, feed him, wind him and put him in his crib when it's time for his nap. I'll fuss over him and give him all the attention he needs. That's all. That's my revenge." I didn't understand and told her so. She came back saying, "Honey, how'd you like it if I did that to you? Wouldn't you get angry? How'd you like to be treated like a little baby? Would you like the girl you had taken a shine to treaten you that way? He'll get to be in my arms all right, but only as a baby. He'll understand everything I say and do to him. Maybe I'll take the two of you in town to see everybody and make him suck his thumb in front of all the girls in the stores. Then I'd take him to visit his no-good friends and show them God's judgment on women molesters. I 'spect he'd be so mortified, he'd probably pee his diaper right in front of them. I plan to coddle and baby him till he plumb weeps to be forgiven. When he cries, I'll tickle his tummy and bounce him on my knee until he stops. When he pees and messes in his diaper, I'll ask him who changed his diaper when he was out drinking with his friends. I'll play with his privates and tease him about how small they are. And when I get tired of him, I'll put a pacifier in his mouth and put him down in his crib. If he gives me any trouble, I'll just whisper in his ear and tell him the same thing your ma tells him if he won tea drink from his bottle." I looked at her in wonderment and asked her, "Mary Jo, ma never did tell me how she gets him to suck on his baba. Would you tell me?" "Why sure, child. It ain't much of nothing. She only tells him that a baby who won't drink from his bottle ain't ready for it yet. That gets him to sucking right quick, she told me. I was more confused than before she told me. I couldn't figure how that'd make him start sucking all sudden like, and I told her so. She came right back at me and said, "Honey, a baby that ain't ready for bottle feeding ain't ready to be weaned. Fact is, that baby's gonna have to be breastfed until he is ready for a bottle. But who's gonna breastfeed him? Ma ain't nursing no baby." I asked her, "Honey, if your ma could turn a growed man into a little baby overnight, do you think a little thing like nursing would slow her down any?" "No, she'd be feeding him that night, I spect. Shane knows that if he makes his ma mad at him he'll be a sucking at his ma's tit before the day is out. It'd be a long time before he'd get to eat solid food again. If he make me mad it'd be the same, I'd tell your ma and he'd be punished just the same. And if your ma had to cart him round regular to breastfeed him, I'd bet my bottom dollar that she'd make him even younger to lighten the load. 5-6 months is 'bout weaning age round here. He wouldn't even be able to crawl. The best he could manage then would be to creep on his belly. Imagine spending your life creeping along the floor on your belly to get somewheres. Your ma would probably make him sleep in a cradle stead of his crib. He'd be in a purty fix then. He'd have to lie on his back all helpless like cause he couldn't turn over or get out lest someone came and helped him. Look at him. He understands what I'm saying and he knows I'll do just what I say. By the time I'm finished with him, I'll have him cooing and sucking his thumb at the sight of me. Child, just look at his face, the poor thing is weeping, he knows I mean it." I looked at Shane and sure enough, tears were rolling down his face and he looked like he was plain mortified. I giggled in spite of myself and said, "Mary Jo, I don't think he likes that idea much. But, since Ma told you to do it, I guess I'll have to let you. Don't you think it's time for his supper? Ma left some mashed carrots and peas in the icebox for him. Why don't you feed him now? You can give him his formula after you feed him his supper." "Why, honey child," she said to me with a big old grin across her face, "what a wonderful idea. After he finishes his formula, we'll let him play on the rug. I'm just in to see him crawl at my feet." And that's the story of Shane, the would-be ridge runner of the family. He died 'bout 2 years ago from the ague. Ma died 'bout a year later of a broken heart. She never did tire of taking care of Shane and Mary Jo turned out to be right 'bout Shane in the end. After a year of being treated like a baby, Shane seemed to start liking it. He'd laugh when we played patacake and peekaboo just like a baby. He stopped being afraid of Mary Jo, he'd smile and coo at her whenever she came over. Mary Jo fell in love with him too, she used to say he was the sweetest baby she ever took care of, barring her own. So you boys remember, in the end Shane got just what he wanted. He could lie round sleeping all day with his bottle in hand without having to worry about getting up to do any chores. He had women fawning over him and running to take care of his every need, bathing him, feeding him, dressing him and cleaning his dirty bottom. His life was as easy could be. So if any of you all start thinking how nice it'd be to lay back, take it easy and let someone else do the work, I want you to think of Shane. Remember, I told you my ma taught me everything she knew and I don't have no more patience with no good, layabout ridge runners than my ma did. You all have mamas and sisters who'd be happy to have a new baby in the family. Now you all get back to work, there are chores to do.